Alrighty, so today we're doing lesson 10. We are not doing lesson 9. I just knew that, well, for my own OCD, I needed to say this is something we're going to view towards the end of the topic. However, I just want to do it because, we've just done lesson 8. Maybe we should do lesson 9. We're not doing lesson 9 to the end. So today, we are looking at lesson 10. Adolescence as a social construct. And its validities for different cultures. So this is a dot point, again, up the top of your course booklet. Hey, look at our friend here. What a good boy. So we're going to look at adolescence today. Look, I think a lot of this really ties in, and a lot of this lesson really ties in with what we have been doing the past few weeks in terms of unpacking socialization, looking at social institutions. But this is a lesson where we sort of combine all of those sort of thoughts and ideas together, but we're also looking at it under the lens of what does adolescence look like in Western culture? What are the rights and responsibilities that you have? Are they realistic, achievable, etc.? So, without further ado, here we go. So what we would call the life cycle stage of adolescence. Sorry, I'm trying not to block the Bondi cam. The life cycle stage of adolescence is a social construct. And the reason it's a social construct, if you want to do a little arrow here, is that it's different for each culture. Different for each culture. And the concept of adolescence has changed over time. Like this idea of a teenager or adolescence didn't even exist until or wasn't even coined, I think, until it was the mid 1940s. The concept of a teenager emerged. So for most of human history, right, you've gone from being a child and then you're an adult. There was no in between period, at least in the social construction sense of our society. So this concept of being a teenager or an adolescent has really only existed for the past 50, 60, 70, let me do the maths real quick, let me think, roughly 70 to 80 years is when this term has existed. So that's very much why it's a social construct, because it's something that has changed over time. It's a fairly new thing when you consider it, but also the differences in adolescence between cultures varies quite significantly as well. The rights and responsibilities associated for adolescence in Western culture is very different to the rights and responsibilities for adolescence in other cultures. We're predominantly obviously going to focus on Western culture, as is the one we live in. But yeah, understanding this is a social construct, it's something new that hasn't been around for that long. We're sort of the guinea pigs, I guess. So over time, the delay between childhood and achieving social status has changed as it continues to expand. So why it's expanded is because our increasingly specialized, westernized society means that young people are spending more time in education than in previous generations. Hence, they enter the workforce and become financially independent later in life. So it used to be the case in the 40s and prior. Ask your grandparents this, was you would go to school, and from a very early age in school, you would drop out at a very young age, you would hit the workforce, and you were just considered you're an adult now. Not in the sense that you're 18 and legally an adult, but people started treating you like an adult in a lot of ways. And there wasn't as much time spent in education. That meant people weren't living at home for as long. They were financially independent later in life. Like if you look now, the average age of school leavers, like it's legal until you're 17. I think you can leave a little bit earlier in exceptional circumstances with a few nuances, but we won't go there. It's another lesson for another time. So people are then taking gap years after school. They're then doing part-time uni. So people a lot of the time aren't really leaving education until they're like in their mid-20s. Where in your mid-20s, 80 years ago, you were like 10 years experience into your particular industry or career that you're working in. So it's changed a lot. And so therefore the construct of adolescence has changed a lot too, and what it means. So what it means though is that there are extended periods of times of dependency on your parents, and your youth is extended. So your youth period is extended because it's creating a delay in the average age of marriage and children later in later generations. Sorry. So like the age of people getting married is moving a lot older, the age of people having children is moving a lot older, and the reason why that's sort of used as a symbolism of adulthood is that typically people, and again typically, have kids when they feel ready. And what they mean by when they feel ready is that they often feel secure in their job, they feel secure financially, in their location, in their own set ways in life, and usually that comes in adulthood. Typically, for most people, it's not the same for everyone. But all of this is like people are moving out of home a lot later than they used to be. So adolescence is changing a lot, and it's becoming much of a longer period of process. And as we start to live longer as well, is another factor to take into consideration. But being beyond childhood, but not yet considered an adult, is a fundamental issue, and you guys have that at the moment. So around the ages of 15 to 17. So you have this like concept where are you guys being heard, you're nearly an adult now, you got to start behaving more mature, you got to do this, but at the same time you're not an adult, you are immature, like you're a young person. It's so normal and fine, but you're stuck between a rock and a hard place at this point where you're expected to be very mature in certain circumstances, but in others you're expected to be very immature. And the one that you want to be immature in, they don't want you to, and the one you want to be mature in and respected, they want you to be immature for. So it's sort of like you can't win it sometimes. So this feeling, I guess, of lack of rights and recognition can be a problem for a lot of young people. For others, it's a bit of a waiting game, and for others, it can be the best and most exciting time of your life. But in reality, the adolescent experience, I think, is a combination of all these factors. And that's where the social construct of adolescence comes into play a bit. We're going to explore that with a few of these questions here. So the first one is to describe the responsibilities expected of adolescents today. So I want you to describe a few of them, or one or two elements, and then I want you to tell me after that, do you think these expectations are realistic and achievable? Why not? So maybe here in the first two lines you're describing a responsibility. It doesn't have to be all of them, just list a core theme. It might be that you're expected to handle a lot of pressure from parents, school, work. How the hell do I balance all this? Is that expectation realistic? Why not? Is probably the last three there. So let me know. You could probably pick one particular responsibility if you want to help narrow it down. The second question is, how would you describe the rights given to adolescents today? Do you have too many rights? Have you ever heard someone say that to you? Oh, kids these days got too many rights. They're too woke. They get everything they want. They just throw a tantrum. So do you think that the rights given to adolescents today, I think, are too many? Or do you think it's like, hey, actually it's kind of like decent humans, basic human, to be nice to people and to not judge them and to be aware of my rights? Or do you think to some extent it's a bit of both? It's great that we've got these new rights, however sometimes we take them a little bit too far and potentially we're a bit too sensitive about things. What do you think? That's the kind of crux of that question there. Question 3 is, in your opinion, what you think the biggest pro of adolescence is, and then the biggest con. So what's the biggest upside, what's the biggest downside? I would then like you to interview your parents and ask them questions 1, 2, and 3. So I want you to ask your parents these questions, these exact questions here. So you're asking them to describe rights and responsibilities for adolescents today, and if they think they're realistic and achievable. I want you to ask your parents, would you describe the rights given to them today is too much? And then I also want you to ask your parents what the biggest pro and con of adolescence is in their opinion, and then write their answers here. You can ask one parent if you want, you can ask both, you can ask someone else if you prefer, whatever. But write their answers down here, but interview them. It'll be a good dinner table conversation. The last thing is question 5. Compare your adolescent experience with your parents using a continuity and change table. So typically once you've interviewed your parents, Write down 3 things that they talk about which has stayed the same, that you think both you and your parents, or whoever it is you're interviewing, has experienced continuity in. And then what has changed. Just 3 things. I know there's more than 3 for each, but just pick 3. And that's the lesson. Thanks.